Linda Bernard, also Detroit Police Commissioner Linda Bernard. I'm delighted to have you viewing us today, listening to us here at WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. You can watch us, listen to us, and interact with us any kind of way you like, quite frankly, on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all of the social media platforms. I'm excited today because I have a wonderful guest. You can see him. He's handsome and distinguished and has this Nike symbol and the Cranbrook football symbol on his chest. And he is, as you might well guess, ladies and gentlemen, a football player. I mean, he wears it well. My guest is Mr. George Davis, the coach of the Cranbrook football team and also a business executive with the Detroit Salt Company. Welcome, George.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm really excited to have you with us today. One, because football is my absolute favorite sport. I've been to 17 Super Bowls. I'm not going this year. It's in Phoenix again, and I'm not crazy about the Phoenix Super Bowls. They're not. I mean, just as a point of information, the best Super Bowls in the world are in New Orleans, because New Orleans is a wide open place. The food is good, the liquor's good, the parties are good, the clubs are good. Everything is just copacetic. I mean, I'm just telling the truth.
All right.
And I'm saying that to you because I know you love football. And the very first Super Bowl I went to ever in my life was actually in New Orleans. And while I was there, I met Walter Payton.
Wow.
So that helped. I mean, Roger Starr, a whole so many people. It was unbelievable. I mean, really cool. Anyway, but because New Orleans is that kind of town, they don't have cliques like other cities do. Like in LA, you got to be in Beverly Hills, or you got to be here, you got to be there. And you don't have that atrocious traffic that you have in LA. It's not as bad in Phoenix because they have those giant freeways. But it's not New Orleans. It's not the pocket. You know what I mean? You know how it's got to be tight. And New Orleans is tight. The Ritz-Carlton, everything's right downtown. Everything is right there. And I say that, and you would have enjoyed this because we were actually that time I was staying at the Ritz. My niece was with me. And these big buses were outside that you're used to, and they had this big blue star on them. They were the buses of the owner of the Dallas Cowboys. So he that's how he travels around town because he has an entourage. So there's the big Texas plates on the bus, the big star, the big blue star for the Dallas Cowboys, and the Cowboys weren't even playing, but that had nothing to do with it. He's an owner, one of the 32 owners of the NFL, and so he was there, and of course his friends were there. And when they go places around town, because there's too many of them for a limousine, he is his comfort, two of them coaches.
Wow.
I mean, two full length aluminum. They're not aluminum, they're steel, I guess.
Right.
Buses. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
You know what these owners, how these owners like to how they like to roll when they're in town. Of course, he flew in on his jet, but his transpo was there waiting on him.
Oh yeah.
And the good part about it, and I'm sorry to go off like this, but was that his drivers and security were black men, like yourself, and I respected that.
Yeah.
It made a difference to me, because those jobs are important to my people and to my community, and I know you would have appreciated it as well.
Oh yes.
George, that's like King George.
No kings, man.
Oh, yeah, you are. You're a king in your own right, and you're a very, very distinguished gentleman. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? You're a native Detroiter?
Was born in Ohio, but raised.
What part of Ohio?
At Xenia, in the Wilberforce area, right at Wilberforce University.
And you didn't go to the HBCU?
No,
ladies and gentlemen, tell us what Wilberforce is. You tell our audience.
Wilberforce is a AME college, sponsored by the AME Church, of which I am still a member of that at this time.
It's a black college.
But it's a HBCU, distinguished right across the street from Central State University.
Which is also a black school.
Which is also a black school. And my mother came there to work at Central State. She had graduated from Tuskegee and moved there from Alabama. And took a job working at Central State and managing their food service. And my father had come to the area from West Virginia. His younger brother was stationed at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, so he migrated to the Dayton area. They met, fell in love, got married, and I was their first child. So we stayed right on the Wilberforce campus, and it was baptized in Holy Trinity AME Church right there on the campus. So
I'm going to comment on that. Number one, you are the only person that I've ever met that actually lived in a community with 2 black universities. There is no black university, no HBCU in Michigan.
Right.
The only HBCUs, the closest ones, are the 2 that you just spoke about, Wilberforce and of course Central State.
yeah.
And I say that, and we're going. I want you to know that George did the unforgivable, and left Ohio and came to University of Michigan. But anyway, so he left Ohio State, and this tremendous black community right there in Ohio to come here to the plantation. But anyway, back to the point. I say that not inadvisedly. I say that because the reason that I support Ohio State against Michigan, and actually against everybody probably except Michigan State, and I have no affiliation with Michigan State, but I like Tucker. I won't pull against a black coach. But the reason that I pull for Ohio State over Michigan is because of the fact that they helped our first really black champion, if you will, in the Olympics. Tell us about him.
Jesse Owens. That's
Tell
right.
everybody, where'd he go?
He went to Ohio State.
Wait a minute. Why did he go to Ohio State? Because no white folks would let him in the schoolhouse.
Right.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
Michigan wouldn't let him in. Michigan State, nobody in the North. None of these, quote, Big Ten
Right.
would let him in.
Well, he's my fraternity brother, and so I do give him honor.
What's his fraternity?
Alpha Phi Alpha.
Okay, he's an
And
alpha.
just like I am. And,
Okay.
so I tell people I was born a Buckeye but raised a Wolverine. And,
Oh,
if I can also stipulate this, ma'am, I was born in '67, so I tell people that I'm a riot child. Right, I grew up in the rebellion era. I'll burn this whole mug down if things ain't right. And really, to that end, I was a part of the Black Action Movement, the third movement of it. They call it BAM 3.
I remember BAM.
And we were making sure the university did, what it needed to do to help increase black enrollment.
No, we're talking about Michigan, correct? University of Michigan.
Yep, I went there after going to Cass Tech and graduating there. So those were great years in the mid '80s. We tried to reform things, and enrollment did rise after we got.
Well,
there.
it's less than 4% now.
I know, and we have
Duh.
to get people focused on it.
Right?
Yes.
66% non-black.
Yeah.
4% less than that, black Americans. Okay. I just want to get these stats straight.
Oh yeah, you're right, and I'm a member of the University of Michigan Black Alumni Association here in Detroit, and we're looking to do some things to push that needle a little bit higher, because there's some things that we can do as black alumni so that we can make our university the leaders and the best over and over again. So
Well, once again, I went to the Michigan game, Ohio. I wore all red. Sitting next to my person who invited me is a Michigan alumni from their business school.
Okay.
So he was all blue and gold.
all right.
I was all red from head to toe. I will not pull for Michigan over Ohio State.
Well, that'll be the one-
because of Jesse Owens.
That's
because it's like Jesse Jackson says. Jesse says a car is more than a ride. When we go buy a Mercedes or this or that, we're not looking at, he says there's 7,000 parts in a car. How many of those parts are created by black people or black companies, or how many black employees do they have? They have none. Well, now they have, so they've got some down there in Carolina.
Right.
But then, there weren't any. So that, I look at our history. So I buy a car that I know and from a company that supports my community. And so I feel the same way about college football.
I understand.
I support Ohio State because they have traditionally supported black men and black people in a huge way.
Yes, indeed, and I think you're on to something. First, addressing
A car is more than a ride.
Yeah, the Jesse Jackson piece is very critical to my development, because when he ran for president in '88,
Correct.
he came to the University of Michigan because we were having protests and sit-ins, and he came and stood with us as students to help us to understand that our vote mattered, that our voice mattered, that our school mattered, and as a result of that, they went. The university changed up and created a vice provost for minority affairs. That was the late Dr. Charles Moody, a great man who was very active in the National Association of Black School Educators. And they created an institutional foundational piece that is still standing today, the Office of, it's called Academic and Multicultural Initiatives at the moment. And so there were certain legacies that were growing from that, but we do stand with the idea that our voices count. And so I remember Dr. Jackson saying that. And I will say this about the University of Michigan. The one thing that I do always know about their sports team is the story that happened with President Gerald Ford when he was playing for them, and that he had a black roommate in the early days when they first started letting African Americans play football. And they had gone to play somewhere in the South, and they would not allow him to play, or his roommate. I can't remember the full scope of it, but Gerald Ford stood with his roommate and
Good for
said,
him.
and we were going to do something about that. And so he made that a part, I guess, of his continuation of life. So I do know that there are things in the U of M athletics that are there. Ward Manuel, who is now the athletic director of the University of Michigan, an African-American man from New Orleans, one of my good friends. He was a part of the Black Action movements of the 1980s. And, it was a time when we were able to engage things. Ward and I, at that time, impacted Detroit kids through two programs. He ran the Wade McCree Incentive Scholars Program.
Okay.
And he encouraged those kids to come and do
Wade
things.
McCree was the first black Solicitor General of the United States of America.
Yes, he was.
Appointed by, help me,
I'm not sure who he was.
it wasn't
appointed.
Nixon, it was after that.
It might have been Ford, actually. It might
Yeah,
have been.
okay.
So,
All right.
and then I ran the College Club program, where we had programs in 19 high schools in urban centers, Detroit, Flint.
You mean to get kids to go to Michigan?
To get kids to just go to college, because there was a legislation that was put out by the late Morris Hood. Right, it was
From
called
the city of Detroit, representative.
called the King Chavez Parks Program, and that legislation gave money to universities to do outreach efforts to minority students.
Okay.
And that was and not only in middle school and high school students, but also to graduate students, so they could come to universities and get their PhDs. And there are I'm sure there's somebody who's listening to this who was a King Chavez Parks scholar who's gotten their PhD doing some things. There are kids who are now grown adults who came through the program. So it's been a blessed life.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you for being so personally involved and obviously helping our community and helping kids get this and what could mostly be called an excellent education.
That's right. And it's a beautiful thing, because education has always been a part of who we are as African Americans.
No question.
And education and elevation has been the mantra throughout the years. And so I am proud to be able to continue that tradition that folks have done through my years. My maternal grandmother, her name was Mattie Bell Snyder, lived in Bessemer, Alabama, right outside of Birmingham. Believed so much in civil rights movement that she
Crimson Tide.
Oh, look! Hey, look! I understand. But what was interesting is that not too long ago, my mother found in an old book a poll tax receipt.
Oh my God!
That my grandmother actually had
Had
paid so that she
vote.
could vote in 1956 in Alabama.
You framed it, right?
Oh, it's in my house now. It just encapsulated, because it happened right when the election was happening for President Biden, that when he won the presidency. And it just reminded me that the struggle continues. The South African poets used to say, "A luta continua." The struggle continues, right? It doesn't end once you get a certain point. It keeps on going. And so it just reminded me that when my grandmother was fighting for civil
I'm
rights
so proud
in Alabama,
of her. She paid, and she didn't have a lot of money, I'm sure. Maybe she did, I don't know.
she had to save up for it.
Yeah, but,
Right.
but that was important enough to her to use money that she really needed, probably for other things, to exercise her right to vote.
That's right. And
What's her name again?
Her name was Mattie Bell Alexander. My grandfather,
She's my shiro.
George Alexander, was a hardworking man, and he believed in raising his family and God at the center of everything. And he told her, "Hey, don't go down there to the
I know he
community
told her
center.
don't go down there.
We
He didn't want her to get
He didn't
hurt.
want her to get hurt.
He didn't want her to get hurt.
My
He's
mother,
trying to protect her.
My mother and aunties and uncles told me, look, he'd be going off to work. They'd be like, y'all get your coat on. We're going down here to the center. And we're going to start this. We're going to keep going because, we have to be dignified in who we are. And
She was dressed up like her Sunday best
look here, I'm going to tell you,
to go to vote.
I was just telling someone the other day
And I
that
go with a baseball cap on.
one of the images that I have in my mind is Fannie Lou Hamer sitting up there testifying with the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party with her purse, sitting like a lady.
Just like Queen Elizabeth.
Look, right here, right.
The Queen, you saw that purse, and her hands are gloves.
That's right. Legs crossed at the ankles.
And-
You know what I'm saying?
Always lovely, always dignified.
Right. And when she told you she was sick and tired of being sick and tired, she looked like a lady saying it, but she looked like a sister letting folks know that we've been oppressed and we're not going to take any more of this mess.
Yeah, but she gave them no reason to not consider her as a dignified, respectable person.
That's right.
That was the best part.
That's right.
I really thank you for telling me the story of Maddie Bell Alexander. I'm just awed. I just really am. I'm so glad that your grandmother was strong and didn't listen to her husband and went down there and carried her kids with her because she couldn't anybody take care of them. So they had to go and they sit outside probably and behave themselves. They weren't ripping and running through the yard and up to the corner doing this and that. They were sitting outdoors acting like they had some sense.
Ooh, yes.
Perfectly.
Let me tell you this. Later in her life, she suffered a stroke, was blinded and paralyzed, and bedridden for the last several years of her life. But
Who took care of her?
my grandfather did, and he hired some folks to watch her while he was at.
He brought her home.
Yeah.
She was at home. She
Yeah,
didn't
the whole
put her in
time.
a facility.
He was
or
there with
anything.
her the whole time, cooked for her. But we would go south once school let out, and so
Me too.
so part of
Mississippi every year of my life.
right. So so that was my thing. So I tell people I'm a Southern boy once removed because I spent time down
Every
south.
summer I was in Mississippi.
And I
Every
tell people
summer.
all the time, I can tell you the difference between the Winn Dixie and the Piggly Wiggly. Come on now.
I heard now.
Some people know that.
That's
right?
correct.
And but it was neat because when we were there with her, sometimes we would be there during the day with her and her keeper.
Yeah, you'd help take care of her. That's what
And-
you're supposed to do.
And she still ran the house from her bed. She would say, "Georgia, come sit down here and read me this chapter in the Bible," and that way she knew where I was.
Right.
Two, she was putting the love of Christ in me and make sure I minded as I continued
You
to be
obeyed.
done. Right.
There was no such thing as disobey. It wasn't even a thought.
Oh no.
It didn't even occur to you.
Oh no. Wasn't gonna get because I know about the belt and the switch and the difference between them two.
Me too. I know them well. Unfortunately, I do know them as well. So I'm thank you for sharing that with us all about you and about your upbringing. And in many respects, our upbringing were very similar.
Yes, ma'am.
Because you were in Alabama, I was in Mississippi.
That's right.
Every year of my life. So I understand exactly where you're where you're coming from. It does something to you though.
Yes.
Understanding the Deep South and having spent time there, and even though, of course, we were removed from the abject racism that your grandmother and your grandfather were subjected to, it still does. There's still that problem, that fear. But as we can see by recent events, that fear can exist anywhere now. You can be killed, beaten to death, anywhere. But okay, all right, football. Number one, you are engaged. You are a college graduate from the University of Michigan. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
What'd you get your degree in?
Political science.
Political science. But you never went. Well, you had some political activity in your life with various politicians. Did you ever run for office?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so you just supported the team.
Yes, ma'am. That's me.
Something like what you're doing now with this football team, right? You're supporting the team,
Yeah.
leading the team.
Well, I'm the head coach of the junior varsity at
That's
Cranbrook,
cool.
and our head coach, his name is Nick LaFontaine.
Is he part of the LaFontaine auto family?
No, he just recently moved here from Connecticut with his.
He's not a
family.
rich man.
No, he's not. he's a
The
poor worker.
LaFontaines are a huge auto industry, auto dealership family here in Michigan.
Yeah, he's a transplant. His wife is from here, so he's new to the area. He's only been with us 2 years, but I've been with the program at Cranbrook now since 2014.
Well, before we start talking about the Cranbrook football, ladies and gentlemen, let me just do this really quick station break. You're watching. Check it. Listen to me. You are watching us today on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. You can watch us, listen to us, subscribe, let us know what you think on any and all social media platforms, including YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, everything that you can think of. My guest today is Mr. George Davis, the coach of Cranbrook School, which we're going to discuss Cranbrook right now. Once you hear about it, you won't believe it. But anyway, and you're watching me, Attorney Linda Bernard, on Chop It Up. And Mr. Davis is chopping it up with me today. Okay, Mr. Davis, tell our community about Cranbrook.
Well,
Come
Cranbrook.
on now, tell it like it really is.
Well, Cranbrook is a high-end institution that has.
High end is an understatement.
Yes, ma'am. It's an.
It is an elite private school.
It is.
Where it costs you how much to go there a year?
I think right now it's about close to 40,000 a year.
40,000. This is a grade school, middle school, and high school.
Yes.
40K a year to go to first grade. I just want you to understand this. Now, this is you. As my mama would say, you in tall cotton when you at Cranbrook. And not only is Cranbrook tuition high, they also have a residential program, do they not? Talk to us about Cranbrook. Tell us about everything they offer.
For the high school, there's a residential program where the students can stay on campus, and also the teachers stay on campus. They have their own housing separate away from the students, but it's a great place for a boarding school experience for kids. Kids come from all around the world to be there, and they come from all backgrounds as well. So there are kids who are affluent and from the United States. There are kids who are from China. There are kids they're from East India. There are just people from all over the place. But the interesting thing is that Cranbrook does a great job of trying to reach out to the community and find kids of talent. And that's the thing that it is. So if you have the intellectual ability to keep up with their standards, they're looking for you at Cranbrook. Many of the guys that have played on our team were what I would call the sapio athletic child, the kid who was very, very smart but very, very athletic. And that's really kind of an interesting thing
What
about
kind of
us.
kid did you call that kid?
Sapio athletic, so as in wise, as in
Sapio. Spell it for me.
SAPIO.
Oh,
Sapio athletic.
SAPIO. Sapio. And what does that mean? That's Greek?
Latin.
Latin,
Yeah,
okay.
the Latin sapiens would be wise. It would be
The smart people.
the smart.
Yeah, wisdom.
Yeah, wisdom.
Sapio. Okay.
Right. So that kid who
You
has
go, my brother. You have just educated me today to a word I did not know, and I know a lot of words. But sapio athletic.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
so
That's what I'm looking for from now on.
All right, there
A
it is.
sapio athletic person.
Right, and many outstanding athletes carry that trait. They are very highly proficient and intellectual people, and you can see that with the folks like the Venus and Serena Williams, right? People who have a deep reservoir of knowledge and those two sisters go to the French Open and they speak perfect French. Right.
I did not know that.
Oh yeah, when they go to the French Open, they speak perfect French because you have to speak it to the press there, right? And then greet the people in that language, and they do it flawlessly.
But see, who I would view as a sapio athletic would be Kobe Bryant.
Oh,
since he spoke perfect Italian
He was
when he
next-
received his Academy Award, blew the whole everybody
Next
away,
on my
and
list.
went straight into English.
Yeah.
But wait a minute, and now my favorite sapio athletic person is Giannis.
Yeah.
Who plays with the Milwaukee Bucks, as he
speaks
can go
Greek.
from Nigerian to English
To
to
Greek.
Greek.
Right. That's right.
Go, my brother.
That's right.
Woo-wee.
Yes,
I mean,
sir.
he is so bad, it's unbelievable.
Yep, and you can tell.
And they have the nerve to call him a freak.
Right.
The colossal audacity to call, you can't carry his jockstrap, let alone his briefcase.
Right.
Who the heck do you think you're talking about?
Right. Well, I mean,
Ain't nothing about him freakish.
But here's the interesting thing. I'm going to take you to some other people
Okay, help me.
who we don't really put in that category, but they actually are. If you think of Shaquille O'Neal.
Oh, Shaq, it's unbelievable.
Absolutely a great
But you know
communicator.
who was even better than him, who's really a super intellectual, is Lou Alcindor.
Oh, Lou Alcindor. That's right. He
You
sure
know,
was.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Muhammad Ali is one of those people. Just to be able to poetically express
Correct.
himself on a regular basis.
Correct.
He had that wisdom. He had that knowledge. He had that prescient
Right.
ability to seize the moment. And this is what we find oftentimes in our athletes, that ability to be intellectually sharp and mentally sharp and physically,
Outstanding,
sharp.
yeah.
That's right.
Physically gifted in every sense of the word. I'm going to come back to that that concept in 1 second, but I just want to relate to you and to our audience. It broke my heart when, in an interview, Michael Vick, the quarterback, said he did not know really how to read and write till he went to prison. The Muslims in prison taught him how to read and write, and it breaks my heart every single Sunday when my favorite player, Lamar Jackson, you can see that he has never learned to read. He has such incredible physical ability. And just think, if even now, I blame you, if you're the coach, that you have not sat him down with tutors so he can read and write proficiently. He would be so much better if he could understand language and could read. He can't read.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you let I would hope you. I'm serious. As an athlete, as a person who works with athletes, as an intellectual, would never ever ever have a player that you knew had a deficit academically and you didn't address it.
Oh yeah, that's not.
For you, Lamar could not be on your team.
No.
He'd do all that football stuff with you, and then he got to go to school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're going to take him and work with him or have people work. It's part of what I just couldn't. It breaks my heart. Seriously.
Well, there's a very interesting probably story that needs to be told, because the growth in athletics and academics.
Excuse me, just one.
Yes, ma'am.
On the Lamar part, I understand that's one of the reasons they don't want to give him the big contract. Because it's not that hard to learn how to read. Your grandmother taught you. You said you had to sit in a room and read the Bible to her. She had taught. We had to learn from the Bible too. Sitting there in her lap. There's A, B, C. Whatever.
That's right.
You had to learn from the Bible. But you're right. It's not hard.
Right.
It just takes time.
Time. Right.
And nobody takes the time.
Right.
So I'd like to think that you, as an athlete, as a scholar, as an African American man that comes from the only place in America where there are 2 black universities, Ohio, would never let that happen.
I wouldn't, and to that
Even though
end,
Cranbrook kids are super smart and they're super got money, but I'm just talking about in general.
it would, and to that act, I'm going to add to my origin story, as they call it. So after how I actually get into coaching. With my son's little league football team, they asked me to be the academic coach for the team, and so my job was with the
There was an academic coach.
the Southfield Ravens. Right, I was a member of their team.
That's a high school in the city of Southfield, Michigan.
Well, this was the little league team.
The little league team.
Right.
Okay.
So I was when I was a coach. His name was
They
Lynn
needed
Sanders.
an academic coach.
Yeah,
In Southfield, they're supposed to have a good school system.
Well, the point was this: that we had kids who were from 5 years old to 8th grade, 9th grade kids, but we wanted to make sure as an organization that they were academically prepared as well as athletically prepared. So we would run tutorial sessions for them, give them opportunities to learn and grow. If they weren't doing so well, then the moms and dads could bring them and help let us work with them. And I ran that piece. In fact, the year that I was a coach for 2 years with the Ravens, and we went to the national playoffs in Florida. And while I was there, right, the boys were all excited, get ready to do things. How about this? From 3 to 5, guess where you're going to be? Study tables. I'm going to be here. We're going to do mathematics. We're going to do academics. We're going to do all of your stuff, because you're not coming down here to Florida to just play football and just be out here having fun. I mean, it's a good thing. We want you to have the experience, but these grades are important to every step that you're going to have going forward in high school, in college, and in life. And so we stress that. Lynn Sanders, who was the head football coach there, asked me to come and join the team, and I spent 2 years doing that with him, just to make sure that those boys, were good, and that helped me to then move into the next level of coaching, which was at Cranbrook.
So you just did this voluntarily?
No, it was a team thing. It was
So 2
coaches-
hours, 3 to 5
Yeah,
every day was
yeah.
study table. And so you made sure that they couldn't be in the situation that Michael Vick was in, or Lamar Jackson.
to the extent that I could.
Yeah, I
would help
understand,
them.
but that's the point. At least
Yeah.
you cared enough
Oh,
to
yeah.
do something about it.
Mhm,
Nobody else has cared.
Yeah.
If you had a guy, a young boy, that had Michael Vick's talent or Lamar Jackson's talent, you would recognize it even as a child, I'm sure, because of your trained professional.
Yes.
And what would you have done differently than what his coaches did, quote coaches?
Well, I think so let me also say this: I'm a tutor, right? And I've been tutoring since I was in my mid-20s, right? And that was always how I made, as they would say back before the war, you had your job and you had your hustle. So my hustle was to tutor.
Oh, good.
And so I always tutored in basic K through 12 stuff with kids and families. And so personally, if I had been involved, I would have done my personal best to sit down with him, help him to learn, and then where it was beyond my ability to kind of help him to grow, then you find other professionals who have trained abilities and skill sets to do
So
that.
if Michael had been in your little league stuff, you'd have been on his case.
Oh, right
like
from
white
right
on
from,
rice.
right from the beginning.
You're gonna learn how to read and write, my brother. It won't be in jail.
Right, and it's not just me, but there's so many other coaches who actually believe that.
Really?
That coach in high school here. I mean, you just go through the PSL. These guys really do. I can point out to one coach, Coach Jimmy Macon over at Central High School. He was a part of that staff with me when we were at the Southfield Ravens. He believes in his kids doing well. He believes in making sure that those things. And he's at Central High School right there on Tuxedo and Linwood.
I was just there yesterday at a presentation by Mayor Duggan.
Yeah, and just a fantastic guy, taking almost the school that's over there and doing that has in a neighborhood where people are still trying to make it. He's taken the best he has with nothing and made something out of it, winning championships, going to the this level of state playoffs. So I always take my hat off to Jimmy for what he's done, and he was a part of that team with Coach Sanders, and so it's a thing. These guys that are out here working and coaching do care about these kids in a holistic way.
Can you imagine? Just think. See, you're a coach. I've never been a coach. I played football. Running back was my position. Actually, I was pretty good. I only played with all the boys. I mean, but I was the running back. It was good. I mean, getting hit is hard, but that's okay. That's what you have to do. But can you? I'm just asking you now, as a man and as an athlete and as a person who trains athletes, can you imagine having a person, a kid on your team as talented and tall as Lamar?
Yeah, there's so many kids who have such great abilities, and I think that one thing that we have to grow in is that children are so precious, and they have a full range and gamut of skills and abilities.
Correct. They have to be water.
And one does not cancel the other. So in as much as I enjoyed, and I will not say this, I'm not a fantastic athlete. I just played for a couple of years. It was good. But I had more talent in music and things of that nature. So I've played in symphonies and
What's your instrument?
trombone, and I'm a vocalist as well. So
Sing something to me. Come on now. Come on now.
Hey girl. I don't. That's all I'm gonna do right there. But 'cause that's not the point of the show. But you find kids with such talent, such ability, such creativity, such expressivity, and they're athletes. They're students. They're children. They're thought leaders. They're social activists. They have all of these talents, and we've in our bad way, we've really truncated one from the other. You can be an athlete, but you can't be a musician. You can be a writer, but you can't be a tennis player. And we do it also, speaking in Title IX terms, we do the same thing with our young ladies. And these are the things that we have to kind of get past. We have to say to our young ladies, you can be beautiful, but you're 6'5" and you're elegant, right? You can be the Lisa Leslie. You can be a talk show host and a basketball player. You can speak in French and still win gold, championships like Serena and Venus Williams. You have to be able to say that to a young person, so they know that they have the full range
have to
and
believe
complement. That's right. They have the ability to believe it. And so that's the engagement. One of the things that I do with my players, let's say I'm on the sideline and the other guys are working on something, I'll ask them a math question. I'll ask them something about history. I'll ask them something in different languages. I'll count in
How
different
many
languages.
languages do you speak?
I can work through counting maybe in 3 or 4 languages. I'm Latin was the thing
Me
I
too, because
studied.
I went to Catholic school.
Right,
Now I've forgotten it
but
all.
I can count in French. I can count in Spanish. I can count in German. I can do some of the basic stuff. But it's just fun for the kids because now they're like, oh. In fact, there's an interesting thing that
Creates a different,
Yeah.
it switches their brain.
Yeah, it switches-
left to right brain. Right, I got
and,
you.
and also it engaged them culturally, right? There was a young man on my team and this year who was from Senegal. They speak French, right?
Okay.
There were young men on our team.
African.
Right. There were men who were Greek, right? And so when I divided groups into alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, they were like, oh, Coach is speaking Greek. That's right. Yeah, I can run the whole thing down to you, right? And those are the things
I like those teasers. Those are teasers for them intellectually.
Right.
And they're doing something else. They're doing a play, but then you make their brain switch, which actually is good for them, quite
which is
frankly.
great. Yeah, there was
It's
a
like
young,
being able to dribble with 2 hands.
one of my favorite players who never made it to college. He just went to in terms of playing being an athlete. He was French and Japanese blend kid, right? Not real tall, not real athletic, but just committed, right? But he was a musician, right? So we were trying to get him to do a drill, and he had to move really quickly through it. And so I said to him, "Come on, come through this. Come on." He's like, "Coach," I said, "No, just do it this way. Do it staccato." He was like, "Oh, staccato. Yeah, I understand that." And so he got the rhythm. He got the
Really?
piece. Yeah, and that was one of those musical.
But see, if you
conversions.
weren't an intellectual, you wouldn't have recognized the ability to break through to him. I mean, that was a breakthrough. That was what Oprah Winfrey calls an aha moment.
Yeah.
He realized that staccato could apply to what he was trying to do physically.
That's
And then
right.
he got it.
That's right.
That instant he got it.
That's right. I have players. There was a young man. He was he come off the field, very strong young man, and I said to him, "Hey,
Physical guy.
yeah." I said, "Hey, what's the formula for a parabola?" He goes, "What?" I said, "What's the formula for a parabola? You're a junior. You should know this. Come on, blah blah blah." He's like, and then some of the guys were like, "Oh, it's y equals x squared," and they were like, "Oh yeah, coach, yeah." So then the next couple of days after that, and from that day forward, when he would come in and he would put the
Black
the
stuff.
black stuff, he'd put it in the form of a parabola. He'd do it one way or another, and then we started talking about it. Hey,
I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
Help me out. You mean that when you... This is a parentheses.
a parabola would be like a U, like a shape, right? And so that's a parabolic piece, and you can change it so that it goes this way or that way or down.
And you asked him what was the formula for
What was the formula for a parabola?
and 3 sides and all connected? Is that the formula
it's
for
like
it?
it's y equals x squared is the
I'm sorry.
formula. So
Oh, boy.
so it's like two
Y
answers equals x squared,
equals x squared.
right? But it was a fun thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're learning. Now, be sure you understand what a parabola is.
Right, and then the other math educators out there will know, or even those high school students that might be listening will know that the formula, the answer to the equation is either in the first quadrant, second quadrant, third or fourth quadrant. And so what you'll find is that if you're plus plus, you're in the first quadrant. If you're plus minus, you're in the second. If you're minus minus, you're in the third. And so then I would ask him, I say, which quadrant are you in today? He's like, "Oh, I'm good, coach. I'm in the first quadrant." Okay, great.
So he's on.
Right, and so it was
What's the fourth quadrant then?
will be the minus plus piece. So
Minus plus.
yeah, so it was just kind of how it
I
goes.
gotcha.
But it was a fun thing between us, and as a
Mm-hmm.
bond. And when he comes back to see me, when he's home from school, he'll be like,
He'll
"Hey,
laugh.
coach," I'm like, "Hey, parabola," and he just laughs, and we have a good time, But it's the idea that you can be intellectual, you can be physical, you can be spiritual, you can be emotional, you can be practical, you can be political, but you are going to be who you are as a coach and as a human. It's our job to kind of help kids to realize their full potential. So
Well, now that we know, ladies and gentlemen, you can go to the most elite school in the state of Michigan, which is Cranbrook Academy, and you can go there for 40,000 a year in kindergarten, and in high school they have a campus, and you can stay there. You know, you can have dormitory, you stay in your dorm and all that kind of stuff. You can live there. That's about 120,000 a year, isn't it? For that, when you're paying for the residential, because it's 40,000 just for the academics. It's about 100 grand on the other, or 80 grand.
It depends on your financial need, and I think.
But ordinarily
yes.
it's 100,
Yes.
right? So
Right.
it's 140 grand a year to go to high school there. But it's worth it, and you'd meet a gentleman that is very, very distinguished, who knows what a parabola is, and who quizzes his football players on mathematics and literature and English, and that is Mr. George Davis, who's our guest today on Chop It Up with myself, Attorney Linda Bernard. You're watching us on WJCZ, Cool TV, the coolest station in the whole world. And you can watch us on Facebook or Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, any and all social media platforms around the world. So, having said that, I want to talk to you about a different aspect of your life. You're involved with something called the League of Conservation Voters. What the heck is that?
Well, the Michigan League of Conservation Voters is an organization, a set of organizations actually, that work towards helping the environment through action, pushing for legislation, and electing the right persons to carry on the idea that the planet has to be cared for.
Okay, what you doing? How does it? What is the league doing now?
Well, we have a C3 a nonprofit organization and a C4
Political
organization and 2 PACs. And so our goal is to raise money to elect people who want to be champions for the environment on their regular basis when they're in the state house or in the state senate or in the U.S. Congress or in the governor's mansion or as an attorney general.
Can you tell me what a champion for conservation is? We've only got a few minutes, and I want you to get that out.
Yeah, quickly, it's really someone who believes that the environment has to have priority. And so in the African American community, we're so focused on matters of home and equity and education. Sometimes we forget that we need clean streets. We need green trees in our neighborhood. We need places to walk and have parks. We also need to be free from graffiti and other grime that's a part of and blight in our community. And those things help us to understand the tie between us and those folks who are fighting for clean air and clean water, make sure that there's no PFAS in the chemicals in the Detroit River or in the Kalamazoo River, or to make sure that the Line 5 doesn't break open and spill and put oil all down through Lake Michigan or Lake Ontario.
But it's not going to break open, is it? I mean, were you on that for those people that wanted to close Line 5?
It could, and the organization stands against that piece.
But I thought that all they had to do was encapsulate it into another.
Well, that's one solution.
Like in there, and it's
that's one
safe in there.
That's one solution that's on the table, but the organization stands with the idea that there's a threat to our fresh water in Michigan. And
well, it's obvious that you can't even eat the fish. Did you see the news report the other day?
I saw that.
It said no more fish eating.
Yeah, and that's a challenge. And so, the environment affects us all.
That was troubling to me.
And going back to the country boy in me, right?
Me too. I was thinking about Mississippi the same time.
Right.
'Cause my uncle would catch 50 fish a day. That was the quota
Yeah.
in Mississippi.
Yeah, there was
I have to clean them. I only shell them. I couldn't gut them.
Yeah, for the longest time, there was a black woman who was the head of the U.S. Wildlife and Fisheries.
Really?
Her name was Dr. Mamie Parker, and she was, I don't want to say she was from Arkansas, but she was a woman who truly believed in this, make sure that those things were good, and she learned it from the fishing that her father taught her as a small girl in the backwoods. And we have to advocate for that because we have the same thing. This wonderful state of Michigan has so many wonderful places and trees and lakes and rivers and streams. And when it's not so cold, people are enjoying that. Even when it is cold, people have to enjoy it. And so the Michigan...
I love Four Seasons.
Yeah, so Michigan League of Conservation Voters, promotes the idea that let's find people who will vote the right way for the environment.
How do you get black folks involved in that and people, minorities? Are they interested at all?
Oh, yeah. And it's just a matter of...
Well, I know we're hunters and fishermen because of my own family.
Yeah, but then...
I mean, in the old days, they were hunters. Nobody in my generation does it now.
Right, but if you think about what happened in Flint, right?
That was
you see
a
what I'm
whole
saying?
different thing, yeah.
So see,
Right now, you can't fish. You can't eat a fish.
we can start there. We can go to the water issues in the city of Detroit, in terms of the water department and its backing up of sewers and those things, and the upgrade of our infrastructure that President Biden wants to do. We can go over to Benton Harbor and talk about the challenges they've had there with their system of water. So you can really start to walk through any African American community and say there are environmental issues here that compound the quality of life. And if we don't figure that out and fight for it too, then what good is it if we have the right to vote if we can't breathe, right? You see what I'm saying?
And you can't drink any
And you
water.
can't drink your water, right? So these are all fundamental issues to humanity, and part of our role at the Michigan League of Conservation Voters is to advocate for that change for everybody.
Well, that is remarkable, and thank you very much for sharing that with me. I was not familiar with your work with the conservation of voters of America and of Michigan and everywhere else. And I'm impressed by your knowledge of the whole topic. I want to thank you for joining me today on Chop It Up with Attorney Linda Bernard. My guest is, and I'm gonna let you say your own name. I'm not gonna say
I'm just George Davis.
no, GD, the big fella, the coach at Cranbrook, the most prestigious educational institution in the state of Michigan and one in the world. It has national and international recognition. So this is a bad brother, my sisters, brothers, and our community. And by community, I mean everyone. Everyone's in my community.
Thank you, ma'am.
And
Thank you.
I know everyone's in your community as well.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure. And I will just say that you called me a king. I do not believe in that. There's only one king. He sits high and mighty on the throne. They give the name George to kings and presidents and saints, but to commoners like me, it's just something to work towards. So,
Well,
amen.
your humility is impressive, but your intellectual capacity and your breadth of knowledge is global, international, and just absolutely phenomenal. Thank you for joining me today on Chop It Up.
Thank you, ma'am.